So we have Mike, who is the placement specialist for skilled trades and apprentices with the TTC. Mike has worked with the TTC for over 10 years in various capacities, with his most recent role being a placement specialist for the skilled trades and apprentices. Mike, you there?
I am here, sir.
Okay.
I'm gonna have to get you to give me an intro every time I start something.
Okay.
It was a good
awesome.
intro.
And then we have Darlene, who is the outreach coordinator for the Human Resources Department. Darlene has been an outreach coordinator at the TTC. She's also been working. Her background is working with Humber. Darlene, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. I was on mute.
Okay, awesome. So we're just gonna kind of jump into it just to make sure we keep on time. So you guys talk a little bit about both of your roles at the TTC.
You want to go first, Darlene?
Yeah, sure. So my role at TTC is handling any sort of outreach or relationship building with community organizations and the like. So through the relationship building, I would either attend job fairs, arrange information sessions, any sort of city meetings or community meetings, I would attend that. And then any sort of conferences or networking events, I would attend that as well. And just with the real goal or the scope, focusing on increasing, diverse representation at the TTC. And that's pretty much my role.
All right. So for myself, I'm the placement specialist for skilled trades and apprentices. So TTC has about 4,000 positions, which is about 20% of our workforce that is involved in trades, apprenticeships, or semi-skilled or low-skilled type of positions. So my main programs outside of skilled trades and apprentices are also our seasonal maintenance program, which is one of our best avenues for a lot of people who are interested into TTC and potentially the trades and maintenance to get in. And we hire about 300 seasonal people a year, and that can range from anything from construction laborers to subway janitors.
Okay. What is the eligibility for employment with the TTC?
It's various depending on the role. Most of our positions will require, in the trades and apprentices anyway, or even on some of our semi and low skilled, a grade 12 education. A lot of them do require a G-class driver's license. And then obviously if it's a licensed trade, then it would be a license in that field or an apprenticeship in that trade. And then we look for direct experience for those positions.
Okay. And does the TTC work with the unions to hire your apprentices, or do you hire from outside?
We hire directly from outside because TTC, we have our own unions. So the largest one is our Amalgamated Transit Unit Local 113, which encompasses about 80% of our trades. And then we have QP Local 2 that represents a lot of our trades related to electrical and the electrical fields. So if you are a unionized member at the TTC, you would join one of our two unions that represent the organization.
Okay. So you said that these are unionized positions. Is there a difference between the TTC unions versus, let's say, a trade union that one would think about whether it's carpentry, plumbing, etc.?
Well, just to be quite transparent. So again, if you're coming from a trade union into the TTC, unfortunately, you can't be part of both. It's mandatory that you're part of our union. So that's just part of our collective bargaining agreement. The individual details I wouldn't be able to state. I'm not familiar with all the unions and what they operate, but a unionized worker, so you'd be guided by our collective bargaining agreement, and then obviously you'd be put into our pension and benefit packages as well. So once you're in, you would be part of all three aspects. So there's the only difference between, say, staff like myself or Darlene and the unionized workers predominantly is that we're not tied to a collective bargaining agreement, where the unionized workers are.
Okay. Um, can you talk a little bit about what are the starting wage for some of these jobs, like these skilled jobs or non-skilled jobs?
Skilled trade positions. So, for example, and they'll vary by position, but let's say, for example, carpenter, HVAC mechanic, plumber. The starting wage rate is generally between $40 to $45 an hour plus a skilled trade premium of $1. And then for a temporary, which are more of our entry skill sets, they can range anywhere between $22 to $25 an hour. And then for our apprenticeships, you're looking at the upper side of let's say 29 to $32 an hour. And we also have wage progressions that relate to each of the positions.
So, you know, Darlene, can you talk a little bit about what should someone keep in mind if they're interested in applying for a job within the TTC?
So something that I would encourage somebody to keep in mind is that they look at the job posting very closely and make sure that they do have all the skills and the qualifications for the role. For us at TTC, we look at the resumes. We don't use a computer system. It is manually looked at. So we are looking for those things against the job posting. Also, another thing that I would recommend is that if somebody is applying to TTC, even if they qualify for multiple positions, to ensure that their resume is tailored to that specific position. So like somebody who, I don't know, as an example, is interested in carpentry and plumber, you wouldn't use the same resume for that, because we can usually tell, and you want to highlight the skills that are particular for that position. What we recommend is setting up alerts to your email so that you can get these job alerts, these job notifications that will let you know whenever a position that is of interest to you is posted on our website. We don't post that long on our website just due to the volume of applications that we get. So, as soon as you see a posting, go ahead and apply right away, because that posting at maximum is up for about 7 days. But keeping in mind that we do get a high volume of applications, it could be pulled sooner.
Awesome. Mike and Darlene, can you talk both of your roles are really to get folks employed within the TTC, yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit, both of you guys can talk a bit, how has your roles been different since COVID-19?
They're quite different. There's a lot of implications for the TTC when it comes to hiring. So in my role particularly, on one hand, obviously we were doing job fairs virtually as we are doing right now. Some of our positions have currently been impacted in terms of just being temporarily put on hold. But it's the main issue that we've been experiencing is just that there's priorities over hiring. So obviously TTC is an essential service, and we're here to support the public as best and safely as possible. And there's been a few changes. So the safety aspect has definitely changed in terms of our frontline hiring. We're currently just understanding and realizing where to move some of our priority positions. But in terms of my particular role, other than working from home, which has its benefits and its disadvantages, lately more benefits, it hasn't been a major change as long as you are comfortable, ergonomically sound, and can access everything you need to. So it's been predominantly a good experience in terms of that, but also challenging corporately for our roles.
Okay, and Darlene?
Well, I'm in outreach, so that means going out to, meet with different organizations and attending job fairs and, going into the community. So that has changed, as you can imagine, very dramatically. So a lot of what I'm doing now is, such as this session, virtual and, through email, and just hoping that, and maintaining those relationships in hopes that once this whole thing is over, I can resume, what I was doing in the community.
So thank you both for that. Like I was on the TTC website today, on the job section, and there was a posting saying it sort of slowed down. Like, how is the TTC approaching employment right now? As you kind of touched on, Mike, there's certain, as being an essential service, is there and there's more buses out from what I understand to make sure that the buses are not as crowded. Like, is there any hiring that's happening right now, or is it more around just sort of taking care of the folks that's inside the company right now?
Well, as of today, right now, because this has been such a dramatic shift in operations, and it has been for the world at large, we're really just reprioritizing. So that's why you'll see that there's a current hold. TTC, in terms of when, we're not sure at this time, but I'd imagine sometime soon that we will start posting positions externally and internally again. It's just that we just need to understand which ones are the most important and which ones will have which ones are clear in terms of its impact on safety and making sure that all the measures are followed. Because a lot of our frontline employees do work in teams. So TTC has put major things in place to ensure their safety, but we have I would say more, close to probably thousands of different types of positions. We're about 16,000 people strong, and in terms of hiring, we have everything from blacksmiths to doctors. So we're very diverse. So with that being said, right now, truthfully, I think that we're just at the drawing board and looking at next steps, which should be very short in time to come.
Okay, like you guys answered a few of these questions. I'm not sure if you can answer this question. Maybe you kind of touched on it before, but how would you say, for someone who is, there's folks who may be on the call who sort of want to get into the trades, or they want to get into the trades, and they're looking up traditional, in terms of the skilled trades, they're looking up traditional unions, but then there's options such as the TTC as an example, and you mentioned that it is the unionized, but can you maybe talk a bit, both Darlene and Mike, how does working for the TTC compare to working with a union or other unions, in terms of pay wage, or even benefits and stuff like that? Yeah.
So the total compensation package is quite extensive. So in terms of hourly rate, given the climate in the construction industry the last couple of years outside of COVID, obviously there's been huge competition for licensed employees and apprentices. Now, with that being said, a lot of our wages are still extremely competitive and above market. Some of them we haven't been able to keep up with the private side. Obviously, being a public company, we have our own restrictions. So when it comes to stuff like certain pay and benefits, being that we are public, our union is incredibly strong. At the same time, compared to the private side, we're not necessarily as flexible in very acute situations. So, for example, like an HVAC mechanic, they've grown exponentially. It's probably one of the highest in demand, and they're commanding extremely high wages. So we've had a few difficulties to hire, for example, for that position. Carpenters have been another one that's been difficult. TTC has extremely high safety regulations, and part of that is all of our trades in TTC, if you're a roofer, if you're a bricklayer, if you're a carpenter, require a certificate of qualification. Even our parts person, who we call a store person, requires a certificate of qualification. So our training standards are high, which is a little different to, not to say that obviously the unions on the outside, but the construction and other companies on the outside, because anything non-compulsory that's in the public, private TTC is compulsory. So we do have a great skill set where we are within our unions, and like I said, they're all have either CFQ and or apprenticeships. I can't necessarily compare union, or let's say QP1, Local 11, Local 2, and ATU 113 to some of the other unions out there. They can be extremely diverse, but what I will say is our union is very strong, and they do a great job of not only protecting our employees and ensuring that standards are high, but they have a lot of times, if necessary, there's a very strong personal relationship between our union members and their corresponding stewards and representatives.
Okay, awesome. Can you talk a little bit about that career progression, right? So when we think about a traditional union, you're thinking about, you're an apprentice for a certain period of time, and then you become a journey person. Can you talk about what is that career progression as a tradesperson within the TTC, and what is the pay structure for each of these particular milestones?
The pay structure is, again, case by case cases, because we have a ton of different apprenticeships and trades. But let's say, looking for an example of an electrician. So when it comes to wage rates, they are negotiated between management and union. However, career planning or succession planning within the union is actually done on the management side. So before I get into that structure, TTC has a very large support for all of our employees, anything from resume workshops to practicing interview skills to tuition aid and anything, kind of in between. There's a huge support for our employees to grow and feel fulfilled within their position and their career at TTC. In terms of the remuneration or compensation, so apprenticeships in electrical compared to somebody who's licensed. See, we're unique. TTC is unique. Transit is unique. So when it comes to the area, for example, of electrical, there's a lot of our positions that you wouldn't be exposed to, or very minimally be exposed to, outside. So, like say, our signal technicians that work on the subway, the ones that work on the relays and the signal infrastructure, we actually bring a lot of them in as licensed electricians. We also do bring them in as apprenticeships in the electrical side. We do a little bit of both, but we have an extensive training. I think that's what separates TTC from some of the other organizations, and especially the construction side, is because we're unique, and the duties and the responsibilities you'd have at TTC are really specific towards us. We have a pretty extensive training period. So an electrical apprentice, if they are licensed, then their wage progression or their progression to the next step, let's say, would be 24 months or 2 years. If they're an apprentice, then may take them 4 years. It's just because the skill sets that are required are just a little bit different, or like very specific compared to the outside for some of the trades. Now, for unspecific, for trades that are a little more common, say for example, a coach technician that requires a 310T. So we would hire, let's say, an apprentice with their 310S, and then they would work for us for when we would sponsor them for 2 years, and then they would move into a fully licensed 310T position. And the difference in wage is really pertinent to the role, but on average, just to give you an approximation, can be anywhere of a gap of $5 to $7. But keep in mind, the skill trade premium is $1. We only provide that for positions that require CFQ in comparison to an apprenticeship.
I mean, for me, myself listening, I think one of the behind that question is more, and thank you for the answer, but I think where I was kind of going with that question is more around if you can give like an approximation, like a ballpark, one should sort of expect or look at. Because I was looking at, I know there's a non-skilled or the skilled workers. So you have HVAC and some of the popular trades that folks may know. But maybe, as you say, plumbing or carpentry, where would someone sort of look at as coming in, if someone's thinking as coming in as an apprentice, and where, that's a ballpark.
Yeah. So, well, for HVAC and for carpentry, unfortunately, we're only able to hire people with their CFQ because we don't cover the full spectrum. So if you came in as an apprentice, hypothetically, we wouldn't be able to fill your training standards that Ontario College of Trades previously had asked for. Now, there's a lot of things in flux. With the Ontario College of Trades disbanding and MCTU coming up, I know there's major differences that are in play. But in terms of an overall, our more general maintenance areas are the best way to come in. Because once you're in as an employee, you can move throughout our system two ways. Either you bid, which is done by seniority and qualifications, or you apply, like you would say for coming from the outside. But you can, as long as you're qualified, you can really go anywhere. There's not a huge set of limitations unless a position requires a certificate that you don't have. But the reason why I'm saying this is because I understand that on the private side, the construction industry and the trade side is quite different than how we operate at TTC, just because there are more nuances and specialties. But if someone is an apprentice, and let's say, for example, they're let's say they're apprentice, like parts technician, for example. Like they can come in under an apprenticeship, or they can come in under seasonal and then move around to where they feel they're best suited or where they feel they'd like to grow. So I have to give you a small example. I had a colleague of mine who was in the mailroom, and then he went to school as an electrical apprentice. He did that for a couple of years part time. He applied into an apprenticeship role with us, and then now he's licensed. So there is the most important thing is in terms of just getting into what you feel would be a good fit for you and a good fit for TTC, and then in that respect, you can kind of take off from there. But if you have specific positions, I can answer you. I can't answer it to you generally because we are pretty nuanced. If you have specific apprenticeships or specific trade positions, I can give you the exact answers on those exact positions.
Okay, so maybe can you talk about trade position that the TTC are like, it's sort of that do hire? You kind of mentioned, you said hiring a carpenter. You said like there's certain trades you mentioned that are difficult, but can you maybe talk a little bit some of the trades jobs that are sort of in high demand rather?
For us at TTC, carpenters are one. For us, we call it a tough to hire position. Same thing with HVAC. Mechanics, either 310S or T, are also very high in demand. Lately, we've been hiring a lot of handy person apprentices, which I know is very unique out there. We do hire quite a few roofers and bricklayers. We call them store persons because we have about 12 garages and 6 car houses, so we have a lot of parts technicians required to support our maintenance, our maintenance folks and mechanics. But we have about 90% of all the trades on the outside that we have inside. It's just sometimes they're small. So plumber is another large one as well, and the electrical is probably one of our highest in demand. See, the advantage of the electrical side when it comes to TTC is you can either go into the electrical trade, so a signal technician or wiring and service, or a general electrician. But then we also have a huge mechanical side that we look for people that have electrical experience. So when it comes to our modes, so we have buses, streetcars, subways, and we have wheel-trans vehicles. When it comes to our buses, obviously they look for that's generally for a mechanic. When it comes to our streetcars and subways, right now we're working on it, but it hasn't been created. There's no certificate of qualification for our light rail or rail side. Now, light rail is growing. Hamilton and Ottawa, and obviously Metrolinx are all going to have some form of light rail or above ground rail systems, and that's a new opportunity. So from that regard, we have tons of roles for people on the electrical side that we bring in as trainees, and they'll learn that side of the business. So, for example, rail vehicle analyzer or vehicle analyzer. And the same time, on the mechanical side, if you're not licensed but you have a mechanical background, we have a ton of training programs that will prepare someone for these roles. And when I say these roles, there's hundreds upon hundreds that we will be requiring, or that will be transitioning between last year to the next couple of years.
I just want to piggyback on what Mike was saying. At TTC, one of the benefits that we do offer is a tuition aid program. So let's say you're in a particular role, whatever it may be, TTC will pay 100% if it's something that's directly related to your role. Obviously, it's something that you'd have to do outside of your work hours, so on a part-time basis, on the weekends, evenings, whatever that may be. And then 50% if it's not directly related to your role, or role related within TTC. That's not directly a part of your department or role. So that's something that could be considered. If somebody, let's say, starts in a semi-skilled or non-skilled role, but they would like to, progress into a CFQ role within TTC.
So if you don't mind saying, because my answers have been a little more general, if people want to if you don't mind, people put in the comments which positions or trades they're looking into, just so I can get a sense of our demographic and our audience of interest.
That's a good point, Mike. If you're interested, just use the chat and just write, if there's a specific area that you're interested in, you'd like to know what the pay structures is, and we can get to that at the end of it. Can you talk about, what is the hiring process to join the TTC for one of these positions?
Sorry, I'm just opening up the comments.
So in terms of the hiring process, I'll speak to that a little bit, in general. So the posting would go up and on the TTC website. You would have to click on that posting, create a profile. So that's the number one important recommendation, is creating that candidate profile, because that is the profile that you'll use to apply to any job within TTC. And then also too, if you do get hired within the TTC, that's your profile that moves with you until you leave the TTC. Also to that profile is where you can set up the email notifications to receive alerts about what positions have been posted. So once you create the profile and once you apply for the position, typically each role, depending on what it is and the qualifications, we call them knockout questions. So there will be a few questions that may knock out your application or disqualify your application right away. So for example, with the trades, I'll use that as an example. One of the knockout questions could be, do you have a grade 12 education? Another knockout question could be, do you have your full G license? And depending on what you answer to that, you may or may not be knocked out of the process. After that, then your application goes into a pool to be screened, where the recruiters will sit and they'll screen your application. And on your actual profile, you'll see the status of your application as well. Like it'll say if it's still been reviewed, if your application hasn't been selected, so on and so forth. If your application is successful, depending again on the role, there may be a test prior to an interview, but then typically you would have an interview with the hiring manager and possibly the recruiter as well. And then at that point, if you are successful, then there would be some documentation that would have to be completed. So proof of education, proof of your license, for example. We also do medical test and a fitness for duty test, which is essentially the drug test. And if you pass the documentation and all the testing, then you'd receive the offer of employment. Mike can speak to that a little bit more in terms of the testing. I just know more generally, but that is the hiring process.
So I'm just going to hold that if that's okay. I just wanted to get through some of the comments. So for the folks that are asking about carpentry, so our carpentry is done by a wage progression. So it would just say approximately say $30.50 up to about $40.50. And again, plus your $1 skill premium. For electrical, there's a lot of various electrical positions. So to give you an approximation, as an apprentice, you can start anywhere between 27, 28 up to about 40 and then 40, 41. So most of our positions, it's a 24-month or 2-year wage progression, but obviously there's some exceptions. With carpenters specifically, to be quite transparent, we're generally starting people at the top rate if we're having a difficult time finding it. For electrical, we're kind of in a similar boat, but because there's so many different positions, and obviously the number of workers is quite varying. Carpenters, we may have about say 20 or 30. Electricians, we may have about 200, 300, 400, depending on what we're doing, the projects that we're currently working on. Some of the folks asked about scaffolding. So scaffolding, we don't have a trade specific. We don't have a position specifically for scaffolding, just because a lot of what we do is more commercial, industrial versus construction. So TTC, when we have construction projects, a lot of it is actually outsourced to construction companies. When it comes to internally, we'll have a need for it, but we train on it. So it's not a particular position. You just may be in a position that will require you to set up or to use it or to meet, and we would train you on that. In terms of administration and accounts receivables, those really vary. If you're looking at the pay structures, they can be ballparking. In administration, we have different levels, anywhere between just say assistants all the way to executive. They can range anywhere between say 55 to I would say about 85,000 approximately. I could be wrong on that number, but it's quite a big. There's a big gap there. Accounts receivables is difficult to say because there's a whole accounts receivable section. So it's very large, and there's different roles. So anything from assistants and specialists that have an accounting designation. So again, that range can be anywhere between 55 to about 85, 90,000 as well. And last clip, I'm sorry. I don't know if you want to save questions to the end, or do you want to answer? I can answer them as we go through.
Yeah, let's just hold that last question until to the end. Just pause there. Can you talk a bit about, outside being a driver, or a conductor, talk a bit about what kind of jobs. You've been talking a bit about it, but like deemed non-skilled, semi-skilled, and skilled. For folks just want to give an idea what's the difference, or how TTC sees the difference.
Sorry, you mean just broadly outside of being an operator, or you mean particularly trade related?
I think just specifically around the skilled piece, like so outside, when folks think about the TTC, you think about being either a driver or a conductor. And I wanted to sort of really talk about the skills trades piece tonight. But like when from the skill, there's a document that I saw that really you guys looked at non-skilled, semi-skilled, and skilled. So maybe if you can talk a bit what that means.
So to give you some examples for both. So let's say I don't like to use the term non-skilled, but let's say introductory or low skilled. That can be anything from janitors to heavy duty janitors. It could be our landscapers, excuse me, sorry, construction laborers, even, and then when you move up to semi-skilled, that would range between, let's say, HVAC assistants. Then we'd also have, let's say, your welders, your track welders, sorry, or your people that work on more on the infrastructure, rail bending. Then we have we call them, they're either technicians or they're mechanics, but that are not actually, sorry. We have technicians and people that work to assist mechanics. So those are semi-skilled. So that would be people with, I said electrical background, electrical mechanical background, or mechanical background. It can be, for example, the people that fix our compressor machines. I'm trying to give you more specific because there's a huge range. I think between the semi-skilled, there's probably about a good 1,500 different employees in about 300 different positions. So it's a little broad, but to give you a sense, they would be people assisting the trade. So if it's on our track side, it would be anyone that would be maintaining the track. Again, they would be our welders, our fitters. And then for the skilled trades, it's pretty broad. So HVAC, carpentry, plumbers, electricians, millwrights, mechanics. Like it's pretty, like we have the majority of industrial trades at TTC.
Okay. I guess one of the questions that's been burning is you had mentioned that you have to sort of pick and choose. Like if one can't be a part of two unions. So like I'm wondering if you're saying like the carpenters being as difficult to hire. If I went through one of the unions and I had the skill sets, but let's say I'm out of work right now, is there not a way to work with the TTC but keep my union with my existing union, so to speak?
Unfortunately, not. And truthfully, it's something that's negotiated in arbitration. So if you're coming in a unionized environment, you have to be part of that union, which is, from a recruitment perspective, it makes it difficult because, for example, let's say at this time during COVID, where we have a lot of construction companies that have temporarily laid off their employees, and TTC has work. In terms of helping, in terms of a union assisting to relocate them to to a different company, it's just not possible because obviously we have our agreements and dues, and they have their agreements and their dues, which makes it difficult from a hiring perspective because you are asking somebody to leave a union, which, depending on how long they've been there, may be a very difficult choice. Pensions are also different. So I'm not sure I'm not familiar with all the unions and how they work with their pension, but pension's an important one, especially if people are either thinking long term or they're going to make such a big shift. So with us, we have a direct benefit plan. So 11% of salary of your salary is put into the pension, and TTC matches that. And if you work with TTC for either 29, 30 years or 20 years plus your age factor, then your 5 best years, you get 60% of that for your pension until, well, I hate to say it, until something happens, you would maintain that. So our pension is a little bit stronger than what some of the other companies and unions may offer. Not all, some are exceedingly strong as well, or if not better. But for the people that are on the line, for, say, from the carpenters union, yeah, as much as it'd be great to share resources in that regard, especially during times like this, or to create something, unfortunately, it's either they would have to leave their union to come to ours.
Okay, I appreciate the transparency in that.
Yeah.
I guess I wanted to jump to this last piece around diversity. Are you noticing more women and people from diverse backgrounds working in the TTC in 2020? And
In terms of the trades?
I guess specifically around the skilled trades positions.
When I look at the employee pool, unfortunately in the skilled trades for women, they're not highly represented. So that's why a lot of my outreach is touching base or trying to touch base with organizations like your own and other skilled trades to see what women are involved in their organization and who are interested in the skilled trades. But currently, just based on the demographic data that we have, unfortunately, no, there isn't a lot. There are women, but they're not overly represented at TTC.
Can you, well, what do you think are some of the barriers that women are having getting into the trades or going into the trades? And then the second part to that question is, what are some of the barriers of keeping these women or some of the women in those trades?
That's a really good question. I think it being a male-dominated industry, I think it's hard for women. I think representation is really important. And, if you go somewhere and you don't see someone that looks like you, it's kind of hard to know how you'll fare in that industry. Even we go to the high schools sometimes and, pushing the trades, and a lot of their trades programs, they don't have a lot of teenage girls in there. So I think, looking at it from, I guess, the initial level of schooling and all of that, I don't think that a lot of them are encouraged to go into trades. When they think about the trades, they don't see themselves. Also too, if we look at it from the other side, a lot of the hiring managers might be male as well, could be intimidating. Some of the wording on the job postings as well could be intimidating. So we're looking at that and possibly how to make it I guess more inclusive for women. But yeah, it's something that we're definitely working on.
I just want to add in, Darlene, if you don't mind. So, and to be quite transparent again, we would love to see more women at TTC in any of our roles, truthfully. But when you're speaking specifically to trades, as a recruiter, looking at all the resumes that apply, so to give you a sense, depending on the job, we may get anywhere between 20 to 100. And when it just comes down to sheer numbers in terms of applications, the representation is really low, even on the application side, which obviously gives indication that there needs to be something at a larger contextual level through society, especially education, to promote this. In the last couple of decades, overall positions, trades outside of any demographic has been put in a low light. Just a lot of the accounting side, the IT side, and the business side in general, engineering, have been the focus of our economy and our schools for a while. And in all honesty, trades are going to be more critical as nationally, and even nationally, specifically at TTC, infrastructure becomes even more important. So in my research with what the governments at a municipal, provincial, or federal level are doing, they are going to start pumping a ton of investment into trades, and skilled trades for women is something particular that they're looking at doing. It's just unfortunately these professions for generations haven't been highlighted or haven't been targeted properly to say women, and that's a change that they're working on right now. In terms of TTC specific, when you ask in terms of potential barriers, and to answer someone's question about the different shifts, depending on the position that you get, because we are unionized and it goes by seniority, oftentimes, not always, but often, you will start off, say, an afternoon shift or a night shift with, say, Tuesday, Thursdays off, hypothetically, and then in short time, or depending on which job you're in, you'll get moved to days and then have Saturdays, Sundays off, but you don't get that off the bat. And obviously, that can be difficult for anyone really, but in particularly for someone that can be either discouraging or difficult to do or to have with their family.
Okay, so we're just gonna be wrapping up shortly. I'm just winding down before we open up to the general question. So this is sort of the advice and tips um, portion. If each of you guys, so the first question is, what are three advice you would give for new employees to excel in their roles within the TTC, whatever that may be?
So,
Okay, you can go, Mike.
no, I was just gonna ask for you to repeat. Sorry, it didn't fully come through.
Okay, so the question is, what are three advice you would give for new employees to excel in their roles within the TTC? So I guess in your experiences, seeing new hires and people excelling in companies, is there like three things, or what are the three, three first things that come to your mind in terms of things that make someone stand out in a positive way?
You want to start?
Sure. I'll speak because I'm newer to the TTC. So the advice that I would give, research the company and know the different departments. It's very, I don't even know how to explain it. It's very multi-layered at TTC. So that would be the number one advice. Number two, get to know your team for sure. You work very closely with your team. I think that's regardless of which department you're in. And I don't know, a third piece of advice that I would give, I don't know.
Can you talk
10.
like how important is it that tardiness and showing up on time?
Well, that's where I was going to lead to. So at the end,
Sorry. Okay, go ahead.
No, it's okay, my friend. At the end of the day, what's always critically important as a foundation is yes, one, that you are there on time and you are there ready and eager to work. Hard work has been and always will be a key factor in terms of your own progression, whatever job you're doing. Your attendance is also critical as well on both sides, staff and union, because obviously, if you're employed, and we need you, so attendance is critical. Now, on the union side, there are stricter measures. So in terms of absenteeism, and obviously if you're tardy to work. So those are always the fundamentals. And then in terms of one thing that I try to do in any of the roles I've had, and this is a little bit different than some of the trades, but I've always tried to learn my job, one, as quickly as possible, and to do it as efficiently as possible. Secondly, is to do some research and bring in other skills where I can either make improvements or efficiencies or modernize some of the work that I'm doing. Three is taking on different challenges, because I'm the type of person where if I'm not challenged, I'm going to get bored. And since my boss is on the line, she may still understand that one. And largely, passion is always a big thing. Not only passion for your position, but passion for the work that you do. Like most of our lives are spent working and sleeping. So if you're not enjoying it, if you're not getting value or fulfillment out of it, then obviously that's something internal that people can do, and that will show through in your work. Because it's pretty easy to see those that are engaged and those that are unengaged. The reasons are what's more hidden, right? So coming in with a positive attitude, coming in to do your best every shift, every minute, every hour, every day is critically important. I know that's also challenging. And then if you can, looking at alternate ways, TTC is big on innovation. We have an innovation and creativity reward and recognition program. And to be honest, because I've managed that before, and I created the program that exists now, most of the people that win have generally been people in trades, either coming up with cost savings or efficiencies or creating parts, again, because we're very unique, and sometimes what we require in terms of parts is not really out there, and they have to either be made in-house or designed in-house, and it's a huge opportunity for people in the trades and those areas as well. And also because we are pretty unique, and sometimes we don't get that fresh perspective, bringing fresh perspectives from the private side, from different unions and the positions that people would occupy now. Bringing that into TTC is also a great way to do it, because, like I said, a lot of positions can be specific, and our employees generally do stay for their career, and sometimes that can lead to the same old and get kind of stale. So bringing fresh perspectives is also a very large asset at TTC.
And then on the flip side, can you guys maybe give three common mistakes you see in new employees at the TTC?
Okay.
I would say getting too comfortable too quickly.
Yeah.
Becoming complacent.
Can you give an example of that?
Well, if you don't mind me, sorry, Darlene, if you don't mind me saying when it comes to what I've seen on on the union side, because our unions are very strong, and they do really go out of their way to protect their members if it's either something that they've done, um, regardless of fault. I'll just keep it that way. Some of our employees do feel a sense of because of that protection, they may feel a little bit of sense of entitlement, and that's something that we often see. Our regulations are extensive. Our collective bargaining agreement for just 113 for maintenance alone is probably 300 pages. So that mistake is that they feel because they're part of our union and that the union will fight for them that they make concessions. And the concessions are generally on being late or taking extra longer breaks or an extra lunch or let's say taking Fridays or Mondays off. And unfortunately, we see that either when we hire students, we see that when we hire temporary employees to permanent employees to anything from entry to any other level when it comes to the union. It's not just happens in the union. I'm just saying that's a little more common on that side because they have that protection.
Okay, so complacent is one. Mike, can you give me two more? And then I'm gonna go ask Darlene the same question.
Two other mistakes that they make.
That you see common.
To be quite frank, sometimes, and then this is not common, but laziness is also sometimes a factor. Or um, I've seen it because I have a secondary part-time role, I guess you call it TTC, and sometimes you'll see some of our staff who work on night shift. I've seen some people sleep. I've seen some people eating while they were working. And again, this isn't with any company. We're 16,000 people. If 1% of people are making mistakes, you're just going to see it, right? And that's not a representation of company. That's just human nature. But basically, not following the rules is a big one. And then laziness or not fulfilling their role responsibility in the job is another one that I've seen.
All right, thank you, Darlene.
Getting comfortable, as I said, complaining about your role. I mean, TTC is one of, just me working out in the community, I see that a lot of people want to work at the TTC. So I think that, new employees don't come into your role and complain. It's a great place to work. And then number three, just again, Mike saying, laziness and just taking advantage.
Yeah, and again, I've worked at different companies. That's not TTC specific. That's just human nature.
Yeah.
If I ask each of you, what is it that you each love about your job or your roles?
For me, just going out and connecting with people in the community and just sharing, TTC's vision in terms of, the candidates that they're looking for, and just talking about, the diversity and the impact that TTC wants to have in the community. And I find that, what I enjoy at TTC is that I do have the freedom and the liberty to do that.
Okay, and Mike?
For me personally, I have a little bit of a public service mentality where I just enjoy serving, right? Obviously working at TTC, we are essential. We're the third largest transit agency in North America. And when I remember the why, like transit for anyone, I don't mean just transit through public transit. I mean, commuting from one place to another is just a time that can be frustrating, stressful, and non-efficient. And what I enjoy about TTC is that we do allow millions of people a day to get where they need to go, which is critically important for themselves, their family, for the economy and the community at large, which in terms of purpose, that for me adds a ton of value because you know that you're a cog in a bigger machine that's doing great things and also what's required. I feel TTC does a great job and they try to improve as much as possible. We're very customer oriented. We're not perfect. I'm sure people would kind of laugh at some things that they've seen in news or things that happen, but it really is a great organization. It's kind of one of a kind. I've worked at different places and organizationally they weren't as people focused or as employee focused. TTC does a great job with a lot of different opportunities to ensure your well-being, your work-life balance, and your progression, your fulfillment, and they're family focused in that regard. After that, I do have a great team. I've worked on different teams before. This has by far been my favorite. It also helps when you have great colleagues who are professional and great personally as well. Also, a great manager always makes an enormous difference. We are pretty flexible in a lot of ways, and we are very supportive of our own workers. So all that combined is just what makes going in every day not necessarily just tolerable, but rewarding and pleasurable.